All right, now that we've kind of got a lot of this set up, we are definitely losing a little bit of contrast. And I think now is kind of a good time we can start to go into some of the color grading process. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but one of my favorite ways is add a new adjustment layer, and I like using Dehancer. And Dehancer just is basically a film emulation software. Gives you a lot of cool effects like color profiles, film stocks, and then also some nice post effects like bloom, halation, vignetting, things like that. So I really like just getting a quick start with this and getting a look going. And you might have seen this from other tutorials, but I like adding a slider control to this effect. And inside of film, I like to take the profile, alt click to get an expression. I'll take this pick whip, move it over to the slider, because if you're anything like me, I like getting an idea of what all the different looks look like. And this way, I'm able to just push the up arrow and I can start going through these film stocks quickly. So I don't have to bore you with all this. There's a lot of different film stocks to choose from, but I'm just going to quickly scrub through some of these and see if there's any that we kind of like, and then we can tweak the settings from there. All right, so after going through some of those, I think I'm going to go with 34, which is this Kodak film stock. And I like this because it kind of gives just a little bit of a warm tone to it. But now let's go ahead and kind of give it a little bit more contrast. And what we might have to end up doing, which is fine, is we have these separated out. We might want to bring these elements to the foreground a little bit and have them read a little bit better, but this is a good start. And I just like kind of working my way through these, and I can talk about some of the settings that I like to do. So basically, kind of one of the ways you can work through this is just sort of, adjusting your settings and bumping up, kind of seeing A, B, and before and after of what sort of you're affecting inside of your scene. So, if you want a little bit of a color boost, kind of make it more vibrant, that's probably in the spirit of what we want to do. See what I did there? Just kidding. So we might do that a little bit. We can adjust our contrast levels. And this is just one of the settings. We have lots of settings to sort of be able to tweak where we want our levels to go. For example, we can set a maximum brightness and darkness. If you have some specific ranges you'd like to stay in, and you can hit that. I'll disable that for now. Print's nice too, because we get even more control over our colors and our density and saturation. And if we want, just to double check, we can bring up our lumetri scopes. And this can also give us a way of seeing where our level's at. So we're getting a little high in the highlights here, but and that's something we can adjust with the exposure. We can give it an analog range limiter to make sure we're not exceeding those areas. So if we're liking the highlights, but we don't want to lower our exposure too much because the middle's not looking too bad, enable the white point again. Let's set these back to their default, and we can expand and control the white point of where we want this to be. Right now it's kind of hitting high up there at 100. Maybe we want it to be, more around this 90 area. And it's limiting our highlights just a little bit. We're not losing detail, but we're also not clipping that area all the way at the top. And so maybe we want our blacks to come down a little bit more. So let's just kind of see, it's good to kind of just keep an eye on where we're heading and just sort of looking at it. Yeah, everything's looking pretty nice. So let's keep going to some more of the film effects. The color head, you've probably seen me do this before in other videos. This is a way to get your orange and teal look if you want. So let's go ahead and enable this. So you can see my shadows are going blue. So we might want just a little blue in the shadows. And same with the highlights. If we move this all the way up, we start to get our orange look. So maybe we want just a little bit of that. We can kind of A-B in that. Very subtle. Maybe I'll make this larger for all of us. And we'll just cover this up now so you can see what we're looking with. Get a nice big image there. And it's very subtle, but a little bit's happening. You can push and pull that to your liking as well. Now, some of the other settings I like. Film grain. So here we go. These are some of my favorite settings. We can go ahead and choose a film stock. ISO 50 is going to be a little bit of noise. ISO 500 is going to be way more noise. And maybe I'll bring it into the green channel really quick so you can kind of see the effect of what this noise is doing. And all of these film stocks are going to make the noise larger. 8mm is going to have thicker film grain than 65mm. So if I go to 8mm, you'll see how chunky that's getting. And it's kind of starting to look like 8mm film. It's making it look older. Whereas if we zoom back in here and I go to something like 65mm, you're you're going to get a lot of that cleaned up and it's going to be a lot more subtle noise. So for now, hopefully you guys can see that over the YouTube compression. Let's just go with your typical 35 millimeter. Maybe I'll do 50 ISO. And if we look at our, let's go to the green channel. Usually that's the noisiest. We'll enable and disable that, and you kind of see how much grain we're starting to get into that. If you don't like that, and you don't want to be stuck with a profile, you know, we can make our own custom grain, however much we want, how subtle we want it to be. And if we want just a little bit of grain, we can leave it inside that custom setting as well. I'm going to take a screen grab of that, compare that to the 35 millimeter 50 grain, and we'll A/B it to see the difference. I might like the custom a little bit more just because I can tweak it a little bit, and maybe we don't want so much of that. But one of my favorite features inside of custom is a lot of high-end cameras or film stock. You'll get noise in the highlights, but not so much noise in film stock, at least in the shadows. So if that's something you want to eliminate, you can add noise to the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So if we don't want as much in the shadows, we can bring that down a little bit. And we can always bring it up in the highlights. Oh, so I'll bring down shadows, midtones, and maybe we just want a little bit of that noise in the highlights. Maybe that's too much. Let's just sort of look before and after. And that's just a good way to get a little bit of film grain. Again, might be a little hard to see on the YouTube compression, but is giving us a nice little subtle film effect. All right, halation is awesome as well because we get those little red exposure bloom highlights in areas. And it's just another thing that film does, and Dehancer does a great way of emulating that. All right, so you see right off the bat, some of our highlights they're starting to get maybe a little too much halation. Almost to the part where it's starting to look like chromatic aberration, which we don't really want. So what we can do is we can click this mask mode, and we can start to control this a little bit more. And again, we have our profiles to make it a little bit more subtle, or I mean, obviously the Super 8 might be a little too crazy. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, but hey, a cool VHS effect for sure if that's what you're going for. Let's go back to custom. I'm gonna limit the source so we're not getting as much. I really just want it on some of these areas. I'll bring up the exposure a little bit so you can see that. I just want a little bit. And when we do get it, you know, we want it to be a little more smooth, and let's diffuse it out a little bit. And we're just sort of toning in a little bit those highlights, and the local diffusion could come out a little bit. Let's turn off mask mode and see how bad this is. That's just the exposure. I'll unclick that. Yeah, we're just getting a little bit of that subtle halation effect, which is nice. It just adds a little bit to your render. So there's the before, there's the after. Might be a little bit too warm. I think the global halation is being affected, so maybe we turn that down a little bit because we don't want really the background. We kind of just want this main area. Let me turn off mask mode, turn this back on. And maybe we turn on the local diffusion just a little bit. And it's still warming up a little bit of everything, but it's not too bad. We can turn this down a little bit more. All right, cool. Similar to halation, we have overall bloom. Let's just go mask mode, enable again to see what's being affected. Just a little bit over here, it looks like. Let's go into custom, and let's change the source limiter. Let's just see what it looks like. Let's turn the impact all the way up, and you'll see we're getting it kind of inside here. And again, you know, you got to do this to taste, see kind of where you want it. We can get more detail, less detail, and maybe we just want for this. Yeah, see, that's going to be really crazy. But let's go back and keep this just a little subtle. And it's just blooming it out just a little bit. Maybe we bring it down a little bit more. Film damage, if you want to add, you know, some sort of like film damage and grain look. Don't really need to use for that. Film breath and gate weave kind of gives a little bit of a natural motion to how film moves through a camera, which I probably won't use for this either. One thing I do like is vignetting. Let's turn the feather all the way down. Limit the exposure, and I just want to get an idea of sort of where this is at in the frame. So let's just go ahead and bring it up. Let's feather it way out. And let's set this back to its default, and just a little subtle vignette to bring your eyes towards the middle of the screen. Not too bad. And another thing we can do too is we can click false colors and we get our IRE values, and we can kind of get an idea here too of what's overexposed and underexposed. And right now, technically, the sky and a little bit of this might be a little bit overexposed. And I don't think it looks too bad right now, but what we can do to kind of continue our grading process is we're probably good with Dehancer right there for now, but let's separate this out, which we did in our earlier videos. And we can kind of color correct this a little bit if we want to bring it back in. So here I have all the mountains separated out. Let's go ahead and close all these. I'm going to reset the values for that. And if we wanted to sort of tweak this exposure, or maybe we wanted to pop a little more, we can sort of bring that color in a little bit. So we're just giving this a little bit more contrast. Maybe we bring the brights down a little bit more. And we also separated out the blue banner. Blue banner's not too bad. Maybe we want it, to be a little bit, we want it to be a little brighter or give it a little more contrast. Yeah, just a little bit. And we were also playing with the gold lettering originally. Maybe let's reset that so we can see what we got here. And we're just bringing in our levels a little bit to bring out the color of that gold a little bit. And it might be a little hot, but we can always adjust that down the road. And I did add a deep glow to this last time. And obviously the default settings, this is way too much, but maybe we want it to be, maybe we just want to have a little bit of that gold in there, a little bit of that shine. So right now I'm just playing with the threshold a little bit. More importantly, we need to bring this exposure way down. And I'm just kind of playing and finessing with these values. I have nothing specific in mind. But I think in the end, this exposure value could be very minimal. 0.1's a little bit much as well. Bring down the radius just to keep it a little bit more tight. Maybe I'll just mix it in with a little bit of opacity. And let's go ahead and give this another RAM preview with all our effects. Let's go back and turn on our motion blur and depth of field. And now with everything on, maybe after I'm looking at it, maybe we want the mountains to be the white levels that come down a little bit more. And I think instead of this blue banner, we'll change this to the challenge text. Let's go ahead and just look at that really quick. We'll reset this. Let's reset the crypto mat and select it. And let's just make sure with the crypto mat selected, we get this challenge text in there. Set it back to the matted RGBA. And we're losing that a little bit. So let's go ahead and darken it up, not too much. And I think we can give it just a little bit more contrast, and let's do a RAM preview and see what we got so far. All right, still kind of just doing some tweaks. One thing I wanted to add is just a little bit of a reflection, kind of like a lens reflection with this logo. And I just want to see if this will work a little bit. And basically what I'm doing is just matting this whole area back out, going back to the RGBA. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert this. I'm going to add a radial blur. I'm going to put the source up here in the corner. And basically my goal is I'm just trying to make this look like a little bit of a lens flare reflection. And this effect does render a little slow. I kind of want to get also just the highlights of this. I'm going to set this to add really quick. And what it's doing is just kind of giving it that corner flare look. Kind of like what you would get sort of a lens artifacts from a camera lens. And I'm just kind of moving this radial blur around to kind of get something I like. I'm going to mix it back in the opacity a little bit, make it real subtle. So here we go, just a little bit of a end look at our composite. Probably little things that need to be tweaking, kind of colors need to be fixed a little bit. Sky could be changed a little bit heavy on the snow in the foreground. But overall the workflow on how I like to get stuff out of Blender and After Effects, is all there in all the different sections, and hopefully this helps you guys out as well. And if you guys have any questions on any of this process or anything that I might have left off that you want me to expand on in another video, feel free to leave that in the comments and I will try to get to it as soon as I can. So thanks again, guys, and as always, I'll see you in the next video, and have a great one.